6 years ago, my wife, Lisa, decided she was going to a party. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't against her going out and having fun. But what got under my skin was that dress. It wasn't just short. It was practically see-through, clinging to every curve like a second skin. I told her, "Lisa, look, I trust you, but can you please wear something else? This feels off." She just rolled her eyes. "Stop being so insecure, Matt," she said, her voice sharp, as if my concerns were nothing more than silly paranoia. "It's just a dress. Don't be controlling." Now, maybe I was being insecure, but something about the way she brushed me off, it didn't sit right. That night, I felt like a knot had tied itself deep in my chest. When she left, I stared at the door. That dress burned into my memory, and I knew something had shifted between us. For hours, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, waiting for her to text me that she was on her way home. She never did. I tried calling, messaging, nothing. It was like I didn't exist to her that night. My mind spiraled into places I didn't want to go. What if she wasn't just dancing? What if someone else noticed how stunning she looked? What if... But when morning came, and she finally walked in, looking disheveled and unapologetic, I couldn't do it anymore. Something inside me just snapped. She didn't offer an explanation. Not a word about where she'd been or why she hadn't answered my calls. She only mumbled, "It was late. I didn't want to wake you." That was it for me. I felt hollow, betrayed in ways words couldn't describe. From that moment on, I made a decision. No more. No more trying to reason with her. No more pretending everything was okay. I emotionally disconnected. I didn't yell or fight. I just stopped. The next few days, I slept in the guest room. She asked me once, "What's wrong with you?" I told her, "I'm done." And she just laughed, as if my decision to shut down was some kind of phase. When she tried to talk, I responded with silence. When she asked what I wanted for dinner, I said I'd already eaten, whether I had or not. It wasn't long before the distance between us became unbearable, and one day, without a tear, without a fight, she left. No goodbyes, no second chances, just gone. It hurt, sure, but not as much as I thought it would. She moved out, disappeared into her new life, and I never heard from her again. Or so I thought. 6 years passed like a blur. I built my life back up from scratch. No dating, no relationships. I focused on my career, traveled, and found peace in the quiet. I figured Lisa had faded into some distant corner of the world, living her own life, with no overlap with mine. Until this morning. I was brewing my coffee when I heard the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, I almost dropped the mug right there. There she was. Lisa. She looked different. Not in a bad way, just changed. Older. Maybe, or worn out. Like life had taken its toll. And in her arms was a small child. A little boy, probably 5 or 6, clutching her neck with wide, innocent eyes. "Matt," she said softly, as if my name alone carried the weight of everything she regretted. "We need to talk." The words hung in the air like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I stood frozen at the door, staring at the woman who walked out of my life 6 years ago like I was nothing. And now, here she was, looking me in the eye, holding a kid. I blinked, trying to make sense of the scene, but my mind was stuck between disbelief and fury. "Matt, please," she whispered, as if pleading with me not to slam the door in her face. "Just give me a minute." A minute? After 6 years? My first instinct was to tell her to leave, walk away, and never come back. But something in her voice stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted to hear what could possibly bring her to my doorstep after all these years. I stepped aside without saying a word, and she walked in, the kid clinging to her. I noticed how quiet he was. No whining, no questions. Just silent. Like he knew this wasn't a normal visit. Lisa sat down on my couch, adjusting the boy on her lap. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting. She didn't start right away. She took a deep breath, her eyes downcast, and when she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. "I don't know where else to go, Matt." I scoffed. Funny. That never seemed to be a problem before. Her lips pressed together in a tight line, but she didn't snap back. That was different. The Lisa I remembered would have fired something snarky right back at me. But now, she just looked tired. I made mistakes, she whispered. I know I don't deserve anything from you, especially after what I did. I didn't respond. She was right. She didn't deserve anything from me. But that didn't stop her from continuing. I left because I thought I'd found something better. I was selfish. I thought I needed freedom, excitement, things I thought you couldn't give me. She looked down at the boy again, brushing his hair out of his eyes. But everything fell apart. And now, I don't know what to do. I clenched my jaw. Her words didn't hit me with sadness. They hit me with anger. All those nights I stayed awake, wondering where she was, who she was with, and now she was back because things didn't work out, because life got hard. And the kid? I asked coldly. She hesitated, glancing between the boy and me. His name is Charlie. She paused, then added, almost as if the words were choking her. He's your son, Matt. The world seemed to tilt for a moment, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. My son? How the hell? I whispered, more to myself than to her. I found out I was pregnant not long after I left, she admitted. I wanted to tell you, I really did, but I was scared and stupid. I thought I could handle it on my own. I stared at her, my mind spinning. All those years, she kept this from me. All those years, I thought she had vanished without a trace, while she was raising my son somewhere out there, without a single word to me. Why now? I demanded. Why come back after all this time? Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away. I've got nowhere else to go. His father, his stepfather, left us. I'm broke, Matt. I need help. There it was, the real reason. It wasn't love or regret that brought her back. It was desperation. You thought I'd be your safety net, I said bitterly. You leave. Keep my kid from me. And now, when things get hard, you show up like I owe you something? She didn't argue. She just sat there, silent and defeated. I looked at the boy Charlie, my son. He stared back at me with those wide, curious eyes, not understanding the storm brewing between the adults around him. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to tell her to get out of my house and never come back. But how could I ignore that kid? My kid. None of this was his fault. After a long silence, I finally spoke. You can stay for a few days. Lisa's shoulders sagged with relief, but I wasn't finished. But don't think for a second that I've forgiven you. This doesn't change anything between us. She nodded slowly. I understand. I didn't trust her, not even for a second. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Something told me Lisa's return wasn't just about needing help. It was only the beginning of something far more complicated, and I was going to find out exactly what. The next few days were strange, to say the least. Lisa slept in the guest room with Charlie, and we barely spoke more than a few words to each other. I wasn't ready for any heart-to-heart conversations, and frankly, I didn't care if she wanted one. I let her stay only for Charlie's sake. He was an innocent kid caught in the mess she created. But it didn't take long for the old wounds to start bleeding again. Every time I saw her sitting at the table, using the same coffee mug she used years ago, or catching glimpses of her moving around the house like she still belonged there, it got under my skin. It felt like she had slithered back into my life without permission, trying to claim a piece of something she had abandoned long ago. Charlie, though, was a different story. As much as it hurt to admit, I found myself drawn to him. The way he watched cartoons, how he smiled shyly when I asked if he wanted pancakes. There was no denying it. He was my kid. Every little quirk, every tilt of his head, it was like looking into a mirror of my younger self. One evening, as I sat next to him on the couch, he turned to me and asked innocently, "Are you my real dad?" Those words hit me like a truck. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I had no idea he even existed until a few days ago. But instead, I gave him the only thing I could. "Yeah, buddy, I'm your dad." He smiled, that kind of genuine, carefree smile only a kid can pull off, and it twisted something inside me. Later that night, when Charlie was asleep, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen. "Thank you for being kind to him," she said quietly. I didn't reply. I didn't need her gratitude. But then she pressed forward, clearly hoping for more. "Matt, I know I hurt you. I cut her off, my voice low but firm. Lisa, don't. We're not doing this. You're here for Charlie, and that's it. She bit her lip, looking like she wanted to say more, but wisely kept her mouth shut. I knew what she was hoping for. She wanted me to forgive her, to open the door just a crack, so she could slide back into my life. But forgiveness wasn't on the table. Not after what she did. And if I was being honest, there was a part of me that wanted something else entirely. Revenge. Not the petty kind of revenge. I didn't want to throw her out into the street or make her life miserable. I wanted her to feel it, really feel the weight of what she'd done to me. And that's when the idea started to form. I thought about how she had humiliated me all those years ago, flaunting that dress and walking out like my feelings didn't matter. She left me to pick up the pieces while she played around with her so-called freedom. Well, two could play that game. The next day, I made arrangements for us to attend a party. A big one. It was an annual charity event hosted by some mutual friends from way back. The same crowd she used to party with. When I told her about it, she looked surprised. You want us to go together? I gave her a small, cold smile. Why not? It'll be good to show Charlie off. Let people know he's my kid, after all. She hesitated, but eventually nodded. Okay, I'll try to find something nice to wear. I almost laughed at that. Nice wasn't exactly what I had in mind. This was going to be her chance to relive the freedom she craved so much. Only this time I'd be the one calling the shots. And she had no idea what was coming. Over the next few days, I watched Lisa carefully. She seemed nervous about the party, like she knew something was off, but she didn't say a word. Maybe she thought this was some olive branch, me trying to make amends. I let her believe whatever she wanted. The day of the event arrived. Lisa wore a sleek black dress, tasteful, not too revealing. I could tell she was trying to strike the perfect balance, not wanting to upset me again. But tonight wasn't about the dress. No, tonight was about setting the stage for something bigger. Charlie stayed with a babysitter, and we drove to the venue in silence. As we pulled up to the massive estate where the event was being held, Lisa fidgeted with the hem of her dress. Do you think this is a good idea? She asked softly. I gave her a smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. Of course, it's just a party. We walked in, hand in hand, and I could feel the buzz in the air as people recognized us. Some knew about our past, how Lisa had left me all those years ago. Others had only heard bits and pieces, filling in the gaps with gossip. Lisa clung to me a little tighter as we made our way through the crowd. I could tell she was uneasy. Good. We mingled for a while, exchanging polite greetings with old acquaintances. Lisa forced a smile, though I could feel the tension in her every move. She wasn't used to being under the microscope like this, not with the same people she had once partied with so freely. And that's when I saw him, Michael, one of the guys she used to hang out with, back when things between us were falling apart. He wasn't anyone special, just a charming nobody with an easy smile and a wandering eye. I knew he'd be here. I'd made sure of it. Lisa, I said, leaning close to her ear. Isn't that Michael? She stiffened beside me. Yeah, she whispered, glancing away quickly. Why don't you go say hi? I suggested, my tone light. It's been years. She shot me a look, confusion flickering in her eyes. You want me to? I gave a small shrug. Why not? We're all adults here, right? For a moment, she hesitated. Then, as if on autopilot, she nodded and made her way over to him. I watched from a distance as she approached Michael, her steps slow and deliberate, like she was walking into a trap but couldn't stop herself. They exchanged awkward greetings, the kind you give when you're not sure if the past is forgiven. I saw Michael flash that same easy grin, and Lisa responded with a nervous smile. Perfect. I let them talk for a while, long enough for her to feel comfortable, long enough for the crowd around us to take notice. And then, just as things seemed to relax, I made my move. I walked over, placing a hand lightly on Lisa's lower back. She jumped slightly at my touch, and Michael gave me a curious glance. Hey man, I said cheerfully. Good to see you again. I've been meaning to thank you. Michael looked confused. Thank me? For what? I gave Lisa a sideways glance, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then, with a grin, I said, for taking care of my wife while I was busy rebuilding my life. It's good to know she wasn't lonely. The color drained from Lisa's face, and Michael's smile faltered. Around us, people started to murmur, their attention now fully locked on the scene unfolding before them. Lisa tugged on my arm, her voice low and desperate. "Matt, please." But I wasn't done. Not yet. I turned to the crowd, raising my voice just enough to carry. "Can you believe it, folks? 6 years ago, Lisa left me, and now here we are, reunited." I paused for dramatic effect, savoring every second. With a son she never told me about until last week. The murmurs grew louder, and I could see the shock ripple through the crowd like a wave. Lisa's face was pale, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. "And the best part?" I added, grinning like a man with nothing to lose. "She thought I'd just welcome her back like nothing happened." Lisa's eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't dare speak. She knew this wasn't a conversation she could win. Not here, not now. Michael looked like he wanted to disappear, and the people around us pretended to busy themselves with their drinks, though I knew every single one of them was listening. Satisfied, I gave Lisa a cold smile. "Enjoy the rest of the party, sweetheart. I'm sure everyone will be dying to hear all about your adventures." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, humiliated in front of everyone she once tried to impress. The first part of my revenge was complete. But this was only the beginning. The ride home was dead silent. Lisa stared out the window, her face pale and tear-streaked, but she didn't say a word. I could feel the weight of her shame hanging between us, thick and suffocating. Good. When we got back to the house, she went straight to the guest room without so much as a glance in my direction. I didn't stop her. I had no intention of comforting her, not after everything she'd done. The next morning, Charlie ran into the kitchen, excited to tell me about the cartoons he watched with the babysitter. His joy was a sharp contrast to the tension that still hung in the air from the night before. Lisa appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, looking like she hadn't slept at all. She gave me a cautious glance, as if waiting to see if I was still angry. I ignored her completely, focusing all my attention on Charlie. "How about we go to the park today, buddy?" I asked, ruffling his hair. His face lit up. "Really? Can Mom come too?" I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Mom's going to rest today. It's just going to be us. Okay?" Charlie didn't seem to mind, but Lisa flinched at my words. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but she didn't argue. After breakfast, I grabbed my car keys, and Charlie and I headed out, leaving Lisa standing in the doorway, looking lost and small. This was the second part of my plan. Isolation. I wasn't going to scream at her or throw her out. No, that would be too easy. I wanted her to feel every ounce of rejection she had made me feel. Every silent moment, every cold shoulder, every time I chose Charlie over her. It was all part of the game, and from the look in her eyes, I could tell it was working. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Days turned into weeks, and my plan unfolded exactly how I wanted. Every moment was a carefully calculated step toward making Lisa feel the same emptiness she'd left me with. I became the perfect father to Charlie. Attentive, loving, giving him all the care he deserved. But with Lisa, I was cold, distant, and unrelenting. She tried at first. She would sit with me at dinner, forcing awkward conversations about the weather or Charlie's favorite toys. But I kept my responses short, never letting her in, and after a while she stopped trying. The silence between us grew heavier by the day. She spent most of her time in the guest room, only emerging to be with Charlie. I could see the weight of the isolation gnawing at her, and every time she gave me that sad, longing look, it felt like a small victory. One evening, she tried to bridge the distance. "Matt," she said softly, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Can we talk?" I kept my eyes on the newspaper in front of me. "About what?" "About us," she whispered. "I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But I'm trying, Matt. I want to make things right." I folded the newspaper slowly and looked her straight in the eye. "You don't get to fix this, Lisa. Not after 6 years. Some things don't get undone." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the woman I used to love. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with. But that version of her was gone, and all that was left was a broken shell of the person who had betrayed me. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed to let me see her cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I really am." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you left, Lisa. It doesn't change the fact that you took my son away from me. It doesn't change anything." She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers nervously. "I know," she whispered. I don't know what else to do." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "There's nothing for you to do. This is your mess to live with." I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, drowning in the silence. Just as I could see Lisa starting to crumble, the final piece of my plan fell into place. Another party, this one even bigger than the last. A New Year's gala hosted by one of our mutual friends. And I knew exactly how I was going to use it. I told Lisa about it the next morning over breakfast. "There's a party this weekend," I said casually, not looking up from my coffee. "We're going." Her eyes widened slightly. "We?" I nodded. "It's important. People need to see us together." She hesitated, as if sensing there was more to this than I was letting on. "Do you really think that's a good idea?" I gave her a cold smile. "I think it's a great idea." I could see the conflict in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew better by now. The night of the party, I made sure Lisa looked stunning. I wanted her to shine, wanted everyone's eyes on her, just like before. But this time it wasn't to admire her. No, this time they'd witness her fall. She wore a shimmering silver dress, and even I had to admit she looked breathtaking. But it didn't matter. Nothing she wore could change what I had planned. We arrived at the gala, and the moment we stepped through the doors, heads turned. Lisa clung to my arm, clearly nervous. I gave her a reassuring smile, but in my heart, I knew this was the calm before the storm. We mingled for a while, exchanging pleasantries with old friends. Lisa tried to stay close to me, but I could feel her unease growing by the second. And when the moment was right, I made my move. I guided her to the center of the room, where the music was loudest, and leaned in close. "Dance with me," I whispered. Her eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and hope. For a moment, it seemed like she thought this was the beginning of our reconciliation. A sign that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to the way they were. She smiled, tentative but genuine, and took my hand. We danced, moving slowly to the rhythm of the music. Around us, people watched, whispering among themselves, but Lisa didn't seem to notice. She was too caught up in the moment, too lost in the fantasy that I might forgive her. And that's when I struck. As the music swelled, I leaned in close to her ear, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you remember the last party we went to, Lisa? The one where you wore that dress and left me behind?" Her body stiffened against mine. "Matt, please," she whispered. I tightened my grip on her waist, my smile never faltering. "Did you think I'd forgotten? Did you think I wouldn't make you pay for that?" Her breath hitched, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. "But here's the thing, Lisa," I continued, my voice soft and deadly. "This time, it's my turn to walk away." Before she could respond, I stepped back, releasing her hand. The music kept playing, but all eyes were now on us, watching as I left her standing alone in the center of the dance floor, exposed and humiliated. Lisa's face crumpled, and I saw tears glisten in her eyes as she looked around, realizing that everyone was witnessing her downfall. I didn't stop. I walked out of that room without a second glance, leaving her behind just as she had left me all those years ago. But this time, there was no freedom waiting for her. No new beginning. Just the cold, hard truth of what she had lost. When I got home, I knew it was over. Lisa wouldn't be coming back from this. She had gambled everything on the hope that I'd forgive her, and lost. The next morning, she packed her things in silence. There were no angry words, no pleas for another chance. Just quiet resignation. Charlie hugged me tightly before they left. "Will I see you again, Dad?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. I knelt down, ruffling his hair. "Always, buddy. You're always welcome here." Lisa gave me one last look as she stood by the door, her eyes filled with sorrow and regret. But I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. As they drove away, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It was done. The woman who had shattered my life was finally out of it for good. And this time I was the one who walked away. In the days following Lisa's departure, a strange calm swept over me. For the first time in years, the weight of her betrayal was gone. I wasn't carrying it around anymore. My house was quiet, almost eerily so, but I welcomed the silence. It felt like a fresh start. A life without the burden of Lisa's presence hanging over me. I stayed in touch with Charlie, of course. He was innocent in all of this, and I refused to let my anger toward Lisa affect our relationship. I took him out to the park whenever I could, bought him his favorite snacks, and told him bedtime stories when he stayed the night. I knew he would grow up understanding what real love looked like, something his mother had failed to teach him. Lisa tried texting me a few times. Polite messages, updates about Charlie, questions about his schedule, and a half-hearted attempt at small talk. I responded only when necessary, keeping it short and to the point. She'd gotten her chance to explain, and I had no interest in revisiting old wounds. Life slowly began to fall back into place. I threw myself into my work, hit the gym regularly, and started doing things I hadn't done in years, like reconnecting with old friends. At first, they were hesitant. The rumors of Lisa's return had spread, and most of them thought I might have gone soft and taken her back. But when they realized I had no intention of letting her back into my life, they welcomed me with open arms. It was during one of these nights out with friends that I ran into an old flame, Jessica. She'd been a part of my life before I met Lisa, and seeing her again felt like fate's way of giving me another shot at happiness. Jessica wasn't just beautiful. She was smart, kind, and unapologetically straightforward. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. She was the kind of person who made life feel easy, someone who knew how to laugh at the little things and didn't carry the weight of unnecessary drama. The best part? She had no interest in rehashing the past. With Jessica, there were no questions about Lisa, no judgments, no pity. Just a clean slate, exactly what I needed. But, of course, life wasn't done throwing curveballs my way. One evening, just as things with Jessica were beginning to feel serious, I got an unexpected call from Lisa. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this wasn't just another update about Charlie. When I picked up, her voice was shaky. "Matt, I need to see you." I sighed. "Lisa, I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's important." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby park. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. She looked smaller, more fragile, like the weight of her choices was finally crushing her. "Matt," she whispered when I sat down beside her. "I've made a mess of everything." I didn't say anything. I wasn't here to comfort her. "I just wanted to tell you," she continued, her voice barely audible, "that I understand now. What I did to you, it was unforgivable. I ruined the best thing I ever had, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, maybe pity, maybe closure. But whatever it wasn't enough to change anything. "I'm glad you realized that," I said quietly. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I just wanted to say goodbye properly this time." I stood up, hands in my pockets, ready to walk away from her for the last time. But before I left, I looked her in the eye and gave her the final piece of my revenge. "Lisa," I said, my voice steady and calm, "I'm happy now. I'm with someone who treats me the way I deserve. And you'll always be the woman who lost everything." Her face crumpled, and I saw the weight of my words hit her like a punch to the gut. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting on that bench, alone, just as she had left me all those years ago. This time, there was no coming back. And that was it. The final chapter of my story with Lisa had closed. I had gotten my revenge, but more importantly, I had found peace. The past no longer held me captive. For the first time in years, I was free. After that final meeting with Lisa, it felt like a weight had lifted off my chest. I had faced my past, given her the closure or punishment she deserved, and now I was free to fully move on. No more lingering doubts or what-ifs. My relationship with Jessica flourished. She wasn't just a new chapter in my life. She was the fresh start I needed. She embraced Charlie without hesitation, and for the first time in years, I felt what genuine happiness was like. Charlie became a regular part of my life. Every weekend, we spent time together, fishing trips, movie nights, and afternoons spent building forts out of couch cushions. He started calling me Dad without hesitation, and every time I heard it, I knew that I was finally getting what Lisa had stolen from me all those years ago. A chance to be the father I was meant to be. Lisa kept her distance after that meeting at the park. I think she realized that any hopes of rekindling something between us were gone. Every now and then, she'd send a polite message, updating me on Charlie's school or schedule, but it was always brief. She no longer asked how I was doing. I could tell she was struggling. Word got around that she was barely making ends meet, picking up odd jobs and moving between cheap apartments. The man she left me for had abandoned her, and she had no close family to fall back on. But I didn't feel sorry for her. She made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. One evening, a few months later, Jessica and I were having dinner when I got an email from Lisa. It was strange, longer than her usual updates and more formal. I opened it, curious. The subject line read, "Invitation." The email itself was short but surreal. "Matt, I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I wanted to extend an invitation. Charlie's birthday is coming up, and he wants both of his parents there. It would mean a lot to him if you came. I know it's a lot to ask, but please think about it. Thank you." I stared at the message for a while, weighing my options. My first instinct was to decline. The idea of being around Lisa, pretending like we were some sort of happy co-parents, didn't sit well with me. But then I thought about Charlie. He deserved a normal birthday. He deserved parents who could put their differences aside, even if just for one day. After dinner, I told Jessica about the invitation. She looked at me thoughtfully, her hand resting on mine. "Do it for Charlie," she said softly. "And if it gets weird, just leave." So I agreed. The party was small. Just a few of Charlie's friends and their parents, along with Lisa and me. It was held at a modest community center, far from the extravagant gatherings Lisa once enjoyed. When I arrived, Charlie's face lit up. He ran over and threw his arms around me, his excitement contagious. "Dad, you made it!" I ruffled his hair, smiling. "Of course, buddy. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Lisa hovered nearby, clearly trying to keep her distance. She looked nervous, like she was walking on eggshells. I ignored her and focused on Charlie, making sure he had the best day possible. We played games, ate cake, and sang happy birthday. For a moment, everything felt almost normal, but I knew better. This wasn't some reconciliation. This was just me being there for my son. At one point, Lisa approached me cautiously. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her voice laced with sincerity. I gave her a brief nod. "I didn't do it for you." She nodded, biting her lip, and walked away without another word. After the party ended, I helped clean up while Charlie played with his new toys. Lisa lingered nearby, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing how to start. Finally, as I was about to leave, she spoke. "Matt, I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. For everything." I looked at her, studying her face. She wasn't the same woman who had walked out on me all those years ago. Life had humbled her in ways I couldn't have imagined. But that didn't change what she had done. "I know," I said simply. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she didn't push for more. She knew this was the end. I gave her a small nod, turned, and walked away for the last time. This time, there were no regrets, no lingering anger, just peace. Months passed, and life moved forward. Jessica and I grew closer, and I finally felt ready to open myself fully to the possibility of love again. We took trips together, talked about the future, and dreamed of building a life that was free of the shadows of the past. Charlie became a permanent part of my world. He spent weekends with us, and Jessica adored him like he was her own. Seeing them together gave me hope, a hope I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Jessica leaned into me and whispered, "I think we're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Lisa had been a chapter, a painful one, but it was over now. The life I had built, the happiness I had found, was mine. And this time I wasn't looking back. Just as life began to settle into a rhythm, the unexpected happened. It was a quiet Saturday morning when my phone buzzed. Lisa calling. I debated ignoring it, but something about the timing gnawed at me. I swiped to answer. Her voice was frantic. "Matt, it's Charlie. He's in the hospital." My stomach dropped. What happened? He couldn't breathe. Came out of nowhere. "Please, Matt, just come. I don't know what else to do." I didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." Jessica gave me a concerned look as I grabbed my coat. "What's wrong?" "Charlie's in the hospital," I said quickly, already heading for the door. "I'll come with you," she said, grabbing her purse. The drive to the hospital was a blur. My mind was racing, running through every possible worst-case scenario. I hadn't even known Charlie had health issues. Another thing Lisa had hidden from me, no doubt. But right now, that didn't matter. I just needed to get to him. When we arrived, I spotted Lisa in the waiting room. She looked wrecked. Hair a mess, eyes swollen with tears, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. The moment she saw me, she rushed over. "They said it might be an asthma attack," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't even know. I swear I didn't know." Jessica stood silently beside me, giving me the space I needed. I didn't acknowledge Lisa's rambling apology. I just wanted to see my son. We were directed to Charlie's room, and when I walked in, my heart broke. He lay on the bed, a small oxygen tube in his nose. His eyes fluttered open, and even though he looked tired, he smiled when he saw me. "Dad." I took his hand gently. "I'm here, buddy. You're going to be okay." Lisa stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, clearly unsure of her place. I ignored her and focused on Charlie, sitting by his side, holding his small hand in mine. He was my priority now, nothing else mattered. Charlie recovered quickly, and the doctors reassured us that with medication and careful monitoring, his asthma would be manageable. Still, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that, no matter how much I distanced myself from Lisa, we were bound together by our son. After the hospital, things shifted slightly. Lisa and I talked more brief, practical conversations about Charlie's health and schedule. There was no warmth between us, no attempt at reconciliation, but the hostility had faded into something more tolerable. Jessica, to her credit, handled everything with grace. She never showed any jealousy toward Lisa and was always ready to help with Charlie's needs. Her steady presence grounded me in ways I never expected. One evening, while sitting on the porch with Jessica, I realized something profound. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had fueled my every decision after Lisa's betrayal was gone, replaced by something closer to acceptance. Not forgiveness, just acceptance of the past and all the pain it had brought. The next time I saw Lisa was at one of Charlie's soccer games. She stood on the opposite side of the field, watching him intently, her expression soft but distant. When the game ended, Charlie ran toward both of us, holding up his medal with pride. "Look, Dad. Mom. I got one." Lisa smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes as she knelt to hug Charlie. I could see the regret in her face, the silent understanding that no matter what she did now, she could never fully repair the damage she had caused. After the game, Lisa lingered by her car, as if waiting for a chance to speak to me. I walked over, giving her a moment. "Matt," she said softly, "I just want to say thank you for being there for Charlie, for everything." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "You're welcome, but we both know it's for him, not for you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, as if she had finally accepted the truth. And with that, I gave her one last look. A look that said everything I needed to say without a single word. This was the end of the road for us. There would be no second chances, no rekindled friendship, no more what-ifs. Lisa climbed into her car and drove away, her figure disappearing down the road one final time. As I stood there, watching her car vanish into the distance, I felt a strange sense of peace. The chapter with Lisa was finally closed, No lingering anger, no unfinished business. Just closure. Jessica walked over, slipping her hand into mine. You okay? She asked softly. I smiled, squeezing her hand. Yeah, I think I am. We walked toward the car, with Charlie trailing happily behind us, chatting about his soccer game. As we drove home, I realized something. I had everything I needed. A future with Jessica, a strong relationship with my son, and a life free of the ghosts of the past. For the first time in years, I felt free, and I wasn't looking back.